The first time I saw Sheikh Amir al-Rashid, I thought he looked like someone who belonged to a different century. The marble courtyard reflected his silhouette, tall, deliberate, wrapped in desert-white fabric that caught the light like a blade. I'd been warned he was distant, impossible to read. But what no one told me was that he had eyes that could make silence feel like a language. I'd come to Dubai for a temporary design project, an architectural consultancy for the Sheikh's private residence outside the city. A summer assignment, they called it, though nothing about this place felt temporary. The estate stood in the middle of a vast golden emptiness, where the wind sang against the walls and time itself seemed to slow down. Amir greeted me at the entrance with a nod, not a handshake. His accent was soft, his English clipped but precise. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you must be tired. The desert is not kind to travelers." I remember smiling awkwardly. "I've seen worse," I lied. He gave a small, unreadable smile, then turned and led me through arched corridors into a space so quiet I could hear my footsteps echo. Everything smelled faintly of sandalwood and something cooler, like rain on stone. He walked with the calm of someone who'd never rushed for anything in his life. My assigned room was near the guest wing, overlooking an inner garden of fountains and olive trees. The air hummed faintly with water and heat. Amir left me there with a polite nod. "Dinner is at 8. You may rest until then." When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That night, dinner was served in a vaulted hall that could have fit an orchestra. Amir sat at one end of the long table, me at the other, the space between us so absurd it almost made me laugh. Servants moved quietly, refilling glasses, clearing dishes. He asked me about my studies, my designs, London. His voice was low, steady, not unfriendly but guarded. "Architecture," he said, cutting into his food. "You see beauty in structures. I see confinement." I looked up, curious. "Confinement?" He paused. "When you are born into walls you did not choose, it is difficult to admire their symmetry." I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded, and for a second his eyes flicked up to mine, a small, sharp glance that felt heavier than it should. After dinner I stepped outside. The air had cooled, the night soft and endless. Above me the stars spilled like silver dust. Somewhere inside I heard footsteps, his maybe, echoing faintly down the marble hall. I told myself I was imagining it. The second night a sandstorm came. It rolled across the dunes like a wall of smoke, turning the sky copper and thick. The staff sealed the shutters and Amir appeared in the corridor, his white robes now traded for a dark tunic. His composure didn't falter, not even as the wind began to howl. "Stay inside the west wing," he instructed. "The windows here are reinforced." The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. Candlelight filled the hall, soft and uncertain. I followed him into the main salon where the walls trembled faintly from the wind's pressure. He set a candle on the table and for a moment, his face was lit from below, all shadow and firelight. "Do storms like this happen often?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Only when the desert wants to remind us who is in control," he said quietly. "It doesn't like to be forgotten." He noticed me shiver and reached for a folded blanket from the sofa. "You're cold?" "I'm fine," I said too quickly. He stepped closer anyway, holding the blanket out. His hand brushed mine as I took it, just barely, but it was enough. A spark, immediate and unwelcome, shot through my chest. I looked up, startled, and he was watching me. Not in the way men usually look at each other, not assessing, not hostile, but with a quiet intensity as if memorizing something he shouldn't. Then, as if realizing he'd gone too far, he took a small step back. "Good night, Mr. Hale." His voice was soft now, almost kind. When he left, I stood there in the half-light, heart beating louder than the storm outside. I could still feel where his fingers had brushed mine, a ghost of warmth that refused to fade. Later, I lay awake in the dark, the walls breathing faintly around me. The storm had softened, whispering against the shutters like restless waves. Somewhere beyond them I heard footsteps again, slow, unhurried, moving past my door. I didn't move. I just listened. The air carried a faint trace of incense, like the scent that clung to his robes. For a long moment the footsteps paused, right outside it seemed. Then finally they moved on. I closed my eyes, unsure what to make of the ache in my chest, or why the silence he left behind felt heavier than the storm itself. That was the first night I realized something unspoken had begun between us. Something that lived in the space between footsteps, in the seconds before a glance broke, in the way two people could be separated by an entire world and still feel too close. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, I found myself waiting for the sound of his steps again. By morning, the sandstorm had settled into silence. The world outside the windows was unrecognizable, dunes reshaped, the air still heavy with dust. The power hadn't returned yet, and the whole estate felt softer somehow, stripped of its perfect polish. Amir found me in the corridor after breakfast. He looked less immaculate than usual, a faint shadow beneath his eyes, his white shirt sleeves rolled just once at the forearms. Somehow that small imperfection made him seem more human, dangerously so. "The generator will take time," he said. "My staff can't travel the road until the sand clears. It may be inconvenient." I tried to smile. "I think I can survive a few days without air conditioning, Your Highness." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Then you are stronger than most visitors." He gestured for me to follow him to the west wing, the only section where the air was still cool. My assigned quarters there had been compromised by the storm. Fine sand had forced its way through the shutters. He led me into a smaller guest room near his own. I noticed immediately, only one bed. "I can stay in the study," I offered quickly. Amir turned, his expression unreadable. "There is no need. You will stay here. The study is not insulated." "I don't want to intrude." "You are a guest, Daniel." He said my name softly the first time he'd done so, and it sounded wrong in the right way, too intimate for the echoing hallway. Before I could respond, he moved past me, brushing close enough that his sleeve grazed my arm. "Make yourself comfortable," he said. "I will have tea sent up." When the door shut behind him, I exhaled, half in relief, half in something else I didn't have the courage to name. That afternoon I found him in the private gym, an airy, sunlit space lined with glass walls and tiled floors. I had gone there only to sketch the architecture, but he was already there, working out in quiet rhythm. Sweat clung to his temples. His tunic was off, replaced by a black undershirt that fit too well. He caught me watching him and paused, breathing hard. "Is something wrong?" I swallowed. "No. Just thinking how this room is designed perfectly for sound to carry." He smirked faintly. "You notice everything. Occupational hazard." He reached for a towel, wiping his neck. "And what do you notice about me then?" I froze, caught off guard. He said it lightly, but his eyes didn't waver. "I notice you don't say much," I answered after a moment. "But when you do, it's never what you mean." For a second, something shifted in his gaze, like I'd touched a nerve. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A real laugh. It startled me, the sound, warm, deep, unguarded. "You are bold, Mr. Hale? Or just bad at diplomacy?" He shook his head, still smiling. "Perhaps both." He turned away, but I saw the tension drain from his shoulders, as if the laugh had cost him something. That night he brought the tea himself. I'd been sitting by the window sketching the new terrace design when he appeared, balancing a silver tray. "You didn't have to." He cut me off with a quiet glance. "The staff is resting. The wind carries dust even now." He set the tray down and poured 2 cups. His hands were steady, movements deliberate. The room smelled faintly of mint and cardamom. "Will the desert always feel this silent after a storm?" I asked. He looked toward the window. "It is not silence," he said softly. "It is waiting." We drank in the hush that followed. The candlelight flickered across his face, every line, every angle catching a warm glow. When he passed me my cup, his fingers brushed mine again. I told myself it meant nothing. But my pulse betrayed me. His touch lingered a heartbeat too long before he pulled back. He didn't apologize. Neither did I. We sat in the quiet, sipping tea that had long gone cold. He spoke a little, about the city lights he rarely visited, the endless obligations that came with his title. He didn't look at me when he said, "People think power means freedom. They are wrong." I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. The silence between us deepened. Not heavy, just thick with things neither of us dared to name. Outside, the air had cooled, the wind tracing soft patterns against the glass. After a while I stood to leave. But when I reached the door he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Daniel." I turned. "Do you ever regret the things you feel?" My breath caught. The question hung there, fragile and sharp. "Only when I try to stop feeling them," I said quietly. He looked at me, long, searching, as though he wanted to ask another question but didn't trust his own voice. Then he gave a small nod. "Good night," he murmured. When I returned to my room, the scent of mint still clung to my hands. I lay down on the single bed, the thin line of the adjoining wall between us. Through it I could hear faint movement, the sound of someone pacing, then stopping, then pacing again. I didn't need to see him to know it was Amir. I pressed my palm against the wall, foolishly, as though touch could cross stone. That night, I dreamed of voices half heard, of hands almost touching, of words left unsaid. And when I woke in the gray before dawn, I could still feel the warmth of his fingers ghosting across mine, a secret the desert seemed determined to keep. The nights grew longer after that. Or maybe it was just me, counting the minutes between the moments we almost said something real. By the third evening, the estate had fallen into a rhythm of silence. Power had returned, but Amir still preferred candlelight, claiming electricity was too harsh for peace. I didn't argue. The soft gold flicker suited him. It made the walls glow, made the world feel smaller, safer. I'd taken to working in the open-air courtyard after sunset, the desert wind cooling the stone. Sketches lay scattered on the low table, new terrace designs, some rough drafts of the study's renovation. That was where he found me. He didn't announce himself, he rarely did. I just felt it, that subtle shift in the air before he spoke. "You work even at night," he said, stepping into the circle of candlelight. I looked up. "I don't sleep much lately." His robe moved gently with the wind, a soft brush of white against the shadows. "Nor do I." He took a seat across from me, uninvited but welcome. Between us, the night hummed, not silent, not loud, just alive. I offered him one of the sketches, the one with the open arches and water features. "You said the sound of water calms you." I thought, maybe this design could. He interrupted quietly, eyes still on the page. "You remember what I said?" "Of course." His gaze lifted, meeting mine in the candle's glow. "Most people forget my words the moment they leave my mouth." "I'm not most people." Something flickered in his expression, not quite a smile but close. He leaned back, studying me as though I were one of the sketches on the table. "You are not," he agreed softly. The quiet that followed was different from our usual silences. It wasn't guarded anymore. It was charged, heavy with something that felt fragile and new. He spoke first. "When I was younger, my father used to bring me here during storms. He said I should learn to listen, to the desert, to myself. I thought it was nonsense. But now," he trailed off, staring at the candle, "now I understand he was teaching me to live with emptiness." His voice broke slightly on that last word. I didn't think. I just reached out, setting my pencil down. "You don't seem empty to me." He looked up, startled, as if I'd crossed an invisible line. His jaw tightened, but he didn't pull away. "You should not say things like that," he said finally. "Why not?" "Because I might believe you." The wind shifted then, carrying sand and the faint scent of night jasmine. My throat felt dry. "Maybe you should." He didn't answer. But something in his eyes, something unguarded, almost tender, told me he had. We stayed there for hours, talking about nothing and everything. He asked about London, about my childhood, about the first thing I'd ever built. I told him about my father's old garden shed and how it had collapsed the first week because I'd measured wrong. He laughed, genuinely this time, a sound like relief. At some point, our conversation faded into stillness. He leaned back against the cushions, eyelids heavy, the weight of his world finally catching up with him. "You should sleep," I murmured. "I will. Just a moment." He closed his eyes, head tilting slightly toward me. The candlelight softened the edges of his face, the shadows beneath his eyes. He looked younger like that. Vulnerable. Human. I meant to leave to give him space, but I didn't. I stayed. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Then quietly he shifted, his hand brushing against my wrist where it rested on the cushion. It wasn't deliberate. Not at first. But when I didn't move, neither did he. His fingers settled there, light as breath. I could feel his pulse against my skin, steady, strong, impossibly real. The world seemed to stop. The wind, the flickering flame, even my own heartbeat, everything froze in that single suspended moment. I didn't dare breathe. He wasn't fully awake, I could tell by the rhythm of his breathing, but the touch was unmistakable. Familiar now, but so much deeper. A wordless confession neither of us had the courage to say aloud. My hand trembled once, but I didn't pull away. The night stretched on around us, a quiet so profound it felt holy. Eventually the candle burned down to a stub. His hand slipped away gently, as though even in sleep he feared breaking whatever delicate thing existed between us. I sat there long after he drifted off, staring at the faint lines of my sketches blurred by candle wax. My wrist still tingled where his fingers had rested, the warmth ghosting up my arm like a secret. When I finally rose to leave, I glanced back at him, the powerful Sheikh, now asleep beneath the open sky, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. In that moment, I knew something irreversible had shifted. It wasn't just tension anymore. It wasn't just confusion or curiosity. It was something that lived in the pauses between breaths. And I realized, with a mix of awe and terror, that I'd stopped wanting to run from it. That night, lying awake in my room, I could still feel the echo of his touch. Not a hand on my skin anymore, but something deeper, something that refused to fade. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I'd remember it for the rest of my life. The morning after that night felt strange, too quiet, too bright. The desert had washed itself clean with wind, leaving the sky impossibly blue. The courtyard below shimmered with heat, but inside the air was cold with everything left unsaid. I saw Amir at breakfast sitting alone by the long window. The sunlight caught on the edge of his cup, casting light over his hands, those same hands that had rested against my wrist hours ago. He didn't look up when I entered. He rarely did, but today the distance felt deliberate. "Good morning," I said. "Morning." His tone was clipped, formal, the voice of a sheikh again, not the man who had fallen asleep beside me. I sat opposite him, pretending to focus on the food I couldn't taste. The silence between us thickened like fog. Finally, I forced myself to break it. "About last night?" He stopped me with a glance, sharp and immediate. "There is nothing to discuss." I felt something twist inside me. "You touched me, Amir." His jaw tightened. I was half asleep. "You weren't." He looked up then and the calm cracked. His eyes flashed with something like panic, like anger, but beneath it all, I saw fear. "Do you think this is easy for me?" he said quietly. "You come into my home, my world, and you make me forget the rules that keep everything from falling apart." "I didn't make you forget anything," I said. "You wanted to." His chair scraped slightly against the marble as he stood. "You know nothing about what I want." I stood too. "Then tell me." He froze, the kind of stillness that isn't control but defense. For a long moment he didn't move. The sunlight framed him, outlining every line of restraint he wore like armor. Then, almost imperceptibly, he said, "You don't understand the cost." "Maybe not," I said softly. "But I understand what it feels like when you look at me and then look away as if that could erase it." His breath caught. "Daniel?" "Say it," I whispered. "Say you feel nothing and I'll leave." "I swear." He didn't. He just stared, the words trapped somewhere between his throat and his heart. When he finally spoke, his voice broke. "I have never been drawn to a man." The confession hung between us like smoke, fragile, dangerous. "And yet," he continued quieter now, "you are here and I forget everything I am supposed to be." The air between us changed. No wind, no sound, just the trembling of something neither of us could take back. I took a step closer. He didn't move. "Then stop pretending you can't feel it," I said. "I'm tired of pretending I don't." He let out a breath, half a sigh, half surrender. "Daniel," he said again, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was a plea. I closed the last bit of space between us. My chest ached with every heartbeat. I didn't reach for him, not yet. I just stood there, inches away, close enough to feel his warmth, to see the faint tremor in his hand where it hung at his side. His eyes met mine, raw, unguarded, terrified. "You shouldn't be this close," he whispered. "Then tell me to move." He didn't. He raised a hand, hesitating midair, before brushing his fingers against my cheek, a touch so gentle it almost hurt. I froze, not out of fear but awe. His thumb traced a line just beneath my eye, as though memorizing the shape of me. His touch was uncertain, reverent. I didn't breathe. The world shrank to that single point of contact. His hand, my skin, and the silence wrapped around us. "You confuse me," he said finally. "You make me question everything I've built my life upon." "Maybe that's not confusion," I said. "Maybe it's truth." He shook his head, eyes glistening with something I'd never seen in him before. "And if it is? What then? My family, my name, they are not mine to risk." I swallowed. "And yet you keep pulling me closer." He let out a sound, half a laugh, half a tremor. "Because I can't help it." The confession landed like a breath I didn't know I was holding. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his hand slipped from my cheek to my neck, his thumb brushing the edge of my jaw. The air between us hummed. "Amir," I whispered, "what if I said yes?" His brow furrowed as if the words confused him. "Yes." "To this," I said, barely a breath. "To whatever this is, even if it breaks every rule." He exhaled slowly, his hand still resting at my throat, his pulse beating against mine. "Then," he said, voice trembling, "I would still be afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That I might never want to let you go." The words hit me harder than any kiss could have. I don't know which of us moved first, maybe both. We didn't kiss, not really, it was something quieter, something smaller. Our foreheads touched, breath mingling, every heartbeat spelling what words couldn't. He closed his eyes, his hand still trembling against my skin. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered again, softer this time. "I am," I said. "And so are you." He laughed under his breath, that fragile, helpless sound, and pressed his forehead harder against mine. I felt his breath on my lips, close enough to blur every line that had kept us apart. For a moment, the world didn't exist. Not the palace, not the titles, not the desert outside. Just two people suspended in the space between wanting and surrender. Then, before the moment could collapse into something irreversible, he stepped back. His eyes lingered on me, full of everything he couldn't say. "I don't know what this is," he murmured. "Maybe we don't need to know," I said. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, an acknowledgement, a truce. The air between us felt lighter, fragile but real. When he turned to leave, I expected the distance to return. But before he reached the door, he paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Stay," he said quietly. "Just stay for a while." And for the first time since I'd met him, his voice carried something I'd never heard before: hope. So I stayed. He sat beside me again, close enough that our shoulders brushed, the contact quiet but deliberate. We didn't speak for a long time. The world outside the windows glowed gold with the setting sun, the last light painting his profile in warmth. And as the silence settled, I realized that we hadn't found answers, only the courage to stop running from the questions. When the call to prayer drifted faintly through the open arches, he turned to me, eyes soft, uncertain. "This can't be easy," he said. "It doesn't have to be," I replied. "It just has to be real." He looked at me for a long time, and this time he didn't look away. The sun dipped below the horizon, and somewhere in the quiet, something inside both of us finally exhaled. Whatever came next, we'd already crossed the line. And somehow it didn't feel like falling anymore. It felt like coming home. The days after that night blurred into something softer. The palace, once so vast and echoing, felt smaller now, not confining but intimate. Our routines didn't change much on the surface, but everything beneath them had shifted. The way he stood beside me instead of across from me. The way his hand lingered a second too long when he passed me a book or a pen. The way we spoke now, careful but unafraid. I found him one morning in the library, sunlight spilling across the shelves, the sound of pages turning like whispers. He was barefoot, his robe unfastened at the collar. For someone whose every movement once seemed rehearsed, the ease looked almost out of place on him. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. He glanced up, smiling faintly. "Sleep is overrated. Tea." He gestured to a small tray between us, 2 cups already poured. The sight made me laugh quietly. "You've learned my habits." He shrugged lightly. "Or perhaps I've learned yours." We sat together at the low table, our shoulders almost touching. The morning light painted the space gold, and I could smell mint and ink and the faintest trace of his cologne. "What happens now?" I asked finally. He didn't answer right away. He traced the rim of his cup with one finger, thinking. "I don't know," he said. "I have lived my whole life knowing what must happen. It's strange to admit I no longer do." The honesty in his voice startled me, not because it was rare but because it sounded like relief. "We don't have to know," I said. "Maybe it's enough just to be here." He looked at me and I could see the war inside him, duty and desire, restraint and the quiet pull toward something real. "You make it sound simple," he said. "It isn't," I admitted. "But simplicity isn't the same as peace." He smiled at that, a quiet, thoughtful curve of his lips. A few minutes passed in silence. He reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine, a deliberate touch this time, slow and certain. My pulse jumped, but I didn't pull away. Our fingers interlaced naturally as though they'd been waiting to. "I still don't know what this is," he said, his thumb tracing the back of my hand. "Something worth not running from," I whispered. He breathed out softly, almost a laugh. "You make even fear sound poetic." Fear's easier to bear when it's shared. That made him look at me again, really look, and something in his expression shifted. The air between us warmed. For a while we talked about anything but the truth. About books. About the old cities he wanted to visit but never could. About how the desert changed color depending on the hour. He told me that as a child he used to sneak out into the dunes to watch the sunrise, pretending the whole kingdom was asleep just for him. I could picture it easily, a boy with sand in his hair, dreaming of horizons beyond duty. "You're different here," I said softly. "When you talk like that." He tilted his head. "Different how?" "Lighter." He chuckled under his breath. You have a dangerous way of seeing things, Daniel. Maybe. Or maybe I just see what's already there. He didn't reply, but the quiet between us didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt alive, like something we were learning to breathe together. Later that day we walked through the gardens. The air smelled faintly of citrus and sand. He showed me the oldest olive tree on the property, its trunk thick and twisted, its roots older than his family's rule. My father planted this when he was my age, he said. He told me once that some things are meant to last beyond love. I glanced at him. Do you believe that? He thought for a moment. I believe love changes shape. But it doesn't disappear. I smiled. Then maybe that's enough. He stopped walking, turning to me. You speak as if this, us has a shape. I shrugged lightly. Doesn't everything? Even the sand has form until the wind decides otherwise. He laughed quietly. You're impossible. Maybe. But you're still here. That earned me a smile. Soft, genuine, the kind that warmed something deep inside me. As the sun began to set, we lingered near the fountain. The light caught the water, scattering gold over his skin. For a moment I thought about reaching for him. I didn't. I just stood close enough to feel the space between us hum. He broke the silence first. You'll leave soon, he said. It wasn't a question. I'll have to, I said. The project ends in 2 weeks. He nodded, eyes down. And after that? I don't know. Maybe I'll come back. He looked up, a flicker of surprise, then something softer. You would. If you asked. For the first time he didn't have an answer. He just smiled, small, almost shy, and looked away toward the horizon. We stood there until the evening call to prayer rolled across the dunes. He didn't move and neither did I. The world was vast, but in that moment, it felt small enough to fit between our joined hands. And though neither of us said it aloud, we both knew something had begun, quiet and uncertain, but real. When he finally turned to go, he paused and looked back. Tomorrow, he said. Breakfast in the courtyard. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And for the first time it sounded like a promise. The next morning arrived quietly, like it didn't want to disturb us. Light spilled through the curtains, soft, golden, alive. I woke to the faint sound of the fountain outside, the rhythm of water against stone. The air was cool, touched by the scent of mint and sun-warmed sand. For a moment I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw the white walls, the carved wooden ceiling, the folded robe laid neatly over the chair, his robe, and everything came back. We'd spent most of the night talking, half-whispered words stretched out until dawn. We'd said nothing reckless, nothing we couldn't take back, but still, everything had changed. I pulled on a shirt and stepped into the corridor. The palace felt different now, awake but gentle. When I reached the courtyard, Amir was already there. He stood by the balcony that overlooked the dunes, a mug of coffee in his hands, the morning sun catching on his hair. He turned at the sound of my footsteps. The smallest smile touched his mouth. You're awake. You sound surprised. I didn't think you'd keep your promise, he said, half teasing. I told you I would. He gestured to the low table behind him, 2 cups already waiting. Then come. The day will not wait for us, but we can make it slow. I joined him. The coffee was strong, bitter, grounding. For a while we said nothing. The silence wasn't the kind that pressed on the chest anymore. It was easy now, something shared. The desert stretched endlessly before us, golden and wild. I watched the light shift across the dunes and wondered how something so vast could feel so close. He spoke first. You'll be leaving soon. Next week. He nodded, eyes still on the horizon. I should be used to people leaving. I'm not just people, I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked the way he always did right before saying something that mattered. No, he said. You're not. The words hung there, unguarded, vulnerable. The morning breeze moved between us, cool against the warmth of the sun. I wanted to reach for him, to take his hand, to close the space that had defined us since the moment we met. But I hesitated. Old instincts die hard. He noticed, of course. He always did. Daniel, he said softly, in my world I have learned to keep distance. To protect what must remain untouched. But with you, he paused, searching for the right words. I forget the rules. I didn't speak. I just watched the way his fingers tightened around the coffee cup, the way his breath caught when he finally met my eyes again. Then forget them, I said. He exhaled, a shaky sound that might have been a laugh. You make it sound easy. Maybe it doesn't have to be easy, I said. Maybe it just has to be honest. For a moment he stood completely still. Then slowly he set the cup down and turned fully toward me. His hand hovered in the air between us, uncertain, waiting. I reached out first. Our fingers met, tentative, testing, and then fit together naturally as though they'd been meant to all along. His hand was warm, steady, grounding. He didn't flinch this time. He didn't look away. He squeezed once, gently, like an answer. And that was it. No grand declaration, no breaking of vows. Just two people standing on a balcony in the quiet of morning, holding hands as if that simple act could rewrite the world. We stayed like that for a long time. The sound of the fountain, the hum of the wind, the desert stretching endlessly ahead, it all blurred into stillness. At one point he laughed softly under his breath. "You realize," he said, "this changes everything." I smiled. Maybe. Or maybe it just makes everything finally make sense. He turned his gaze back toward the horizon. "When I was young, I thought love would feel like thunder. Something loud enough to shake the world. And now I think it feels like this," he said. Quiet. Certain. Impossible to ignore. The light caught on his lashes. I wanted to memorize the moment, the curve of his smile, the warmth of his hand in mine, the way the morning sun painted everything in gold. We finished our coffee in silence. A servant passed by once, pausing at the sight of us, but Amir only nodded, calm, unapologetic. The gesture was small, but it meant more than any words could. When the tray was cleared, he turned to me again. "Will you walk with me?" "Always." We stepped down into the courtyard. The tiles were cool underfoot. Birds darted between the olive trees, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and salt. He walked beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed now and then. No more flinching. No more pretending. Just the quiet rhythm of two people learning how to move together. When we reached the fountain, he stopped, looking down at the rippling water. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I met his gaze. "Not a single thing." He nodded, and something eased in his expression, a peace I hadn't seen before. For the first time since arriving here, I realized I wasn't the only one who had been waiting for something I couldn't name. The desert wind lifted, cool and sweet. The world around us seemed to pause, holding its breath. And in that stillness he whispered, so quietly I almost missed it, "You've changed everything." I smiled, unable to stop it. "So have you." We stood there until the sun climbed high and the light turned too bright to look at directly. But I didn't mind. For the first time, the world didn't feel like something I was passing through. It felt like something I was part of. Something real. And when he reached for my hand again, steady, unhurried, certain, I didn't think about tomorrow. I just held on. The future would come as it always does. But for now, beneath the golden morning, we belonged to this moment. And this moment was enough.